At Sunday dinner, I said I was excited for our family cruise, and my sister laughed in my face. That's when I realized I was never invited. My name is Rachel Whitman. I'm 29 years old, and I always believed that if I just kept being the good daughter, the reliable one someday, it would be enough. That belief shattered at a dinner table on a warm Sunday evening, surrounded by the people I thought I could trust the most. "I'm so excited for the cruise next month," I said with a smile, scooping some roasted vegetables onto my plate. I had been looking forward to it for weeks, planning itineraries, researching excursions, even choosing cabin layouts to make sure everyone had their preferences met. I wasn't just excited, I was proud of the work I'd put in. That's when my older sister Veronica let out this little snort, the kind that carries more contempt than words ever could. "Oh, you thought you were coming." Everyone laughed. Not uncomfortably, not nervously. No, they laughed, like it was the most natural, ridiculous idea I'd ever had. My dad leaned back in his chair, grinning like he had just landed a joke at a bar. "Rach, it's for real family," he said, stabbing his steak. "You know, just the four of us." I blinked, trying to compute what he meant. The four of them. But wasn't I family? I felt the sting before I could stop it, but I smiled anyway, nodded. I even offered to help with the dishes as usual, acting like my chest wasn't slowly caving in. They didn't know it yet, but that was the last time they would laugh at me without consequence. I've always been the background person in my family, the invisible thread holding things together. While my siblings racked up mistakes and got bailed out every time I worked 2 jobs through college, no debt, not even a loan from my parents. When I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in hospitality management, the only response I got was, "That's nice, honey." Meanwhile, Veronica dropped out of 2 universities, racked up credit card debt from a failed Etsy business, and still got a new car gifted to her last year. My brother, James. He works with my dad in his construction business, despite having no interest or qualifications. They call it keeping it in the family. I call it a closed-door policy unless your name isn't Rachel. Still, I never stopped showing up. I cooked for birthdays, hosted brunches, sent cards on every occasion, even when mine were forgotten. I told myself love would earn love, that if I just tried harder, they'd eventually see me. So when my parents announced at a backyard barbecue that we were all going on a Caribbean cruise to celebrate their 40th anniversary, I genuinely believed it would be the moment we all connected. A fresh start. I even offered to plan everything using my employee perks at the travel company where I worked. I spent days organizing it, coordinating flights, dining packages, private island excursions, the whole deal. I got them complimentary champagne priority boarding ocean view suites, all under my company's discount. Not once during those weeks of meticulous planning did anyone say I wasn't going. Which brings us back to that Sunday dinner. The moment they decided to inform me casually, cruelly, that I wasn't part of the trip. That all my effort was just a convenience to them. That I somehow wasn't real family. I remember exactly how the air changed in the room, how the laughter died down once I went quiet, how my mother offered a flimsy, "We just assumed you were busy with work," as if that made it better. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I passed the green beans. But something inside me finally clicked. After 29 years of swallowing pain, I was done. That night, I went home, took off my heels, poured myself a glass of wine, and opened the travel agency system. I had booked the entire cruise using my credentials. Every reservation was under my name. Every confirmation, every cabin, every perk, it all flowed through me. And just like that, the power shifted. They thought I was the outsider. They were about to learn just how essential I'd always been. The next morning, I woke up to a tightness in my chest, the kind that sits right between your ribs like a weight you can't name. I didn't have to be at the office until 10, but I was up before sunrise, mind racing, barely able to sit still. The scene from last night played on repeat in my head. Veronica's snide laugh, Dad's smug look, the way Mom stirred her iced tea and said nothing while I was humiliated at her table. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I stared at my laptop. All the cruise reservations were there, neatly organized, just like I had planned. The thought had come to me like a whisper the night before. What if I just changed everything? I wasn't planning on revenge, not at first. That's not who I am. But the more I stared at the confirmation emails in my inbox, the more a new thought settled in. If they could be so comfortable excluding me, maybe it was time they understood what that really meant. I started by opening the agency dashboard. As an employee, I had access to back-end settings that regular customers didn't. Every trip I arranged through my staff account was automatically tied to my profile as the lead coordinator. That meant all changes, payment itinerary, even who got emailed the updates, had to go through me. Dad's credit card had covered the deposit, but the remaining balance wasn't scheduled to hit until 3 days before the cruise, which meant I had a window. I didn't need to cancel the trip. That would have sent alerts. No, I would just make a few subtle adjustments, enough to create friction, enough to delay things just long enough that their plans unraveled. But before I did anything, I needed to clear my head. I called in sick. It was the first sick day I'd taken in 3 years. By noon, I was on my second cup of coffee and halfway through a list titled, "Things They've Forgotten," a catalog of moments where I was sidelined, left out, or used as a tool. The list filled faster than I thought it would. There was the time they scheduled a family camping trip the same weekend as my college graduation. The group photo from James's engagement party where I was conveniently cropped out for Instagram. The Christmas Eve dinner I missed because I had a shift. And by the time I got there, everyone had opened gifts and moved on to dessert without me. I wasn't overreacting. This was a pattern. That realization changed something in me. So I got to work. First, I created a new email alias linked to my work account. I rerouted all cruise notifications to that inbox so they wouldn't see changes in real time. Then, I edited the reservation ever so slightly. I moved the cruise date forward by 1 day, knowing they wouldn't notice until check-in. I changed the primary traveler name from my dad's to a placeholder, which would cause a delay at the terminal. I requested manual verification on the remaining balance, triggering a soft hold on the credit card payment. Every click was deliberate, calculated, clean. No red flags, no alerts, just confusion waiting to happen. But I wasn't done yet. If I was going to vanish from their radar for the week of the cruise, I needed to disappear the right way. I looked up remote cabins within driving distance of Denver where I lived. I found one secluded wood panel tucked into the mountains outside Aspen. It had no Wi-Fi, only spotty cell reception and a landline for emergencies. Perfect. I booked it for 7 nights, the exact week they'd be chasing down airport staff and cruise reps trying to figure out why everything had gone wrong. The final step, I scheduled an email auto-response for that week. "Hi, I'm on personal leave and will be out of contact. If this is a work matter, please reach out to our team coordinator. If this is family, please understand, I need space." Then I set my phone to do not disturb, walked into my bathroom, stared at my reflection in the mirror and whispered, "You don't owe them anything." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. By the time I packed the last of my essentials, 2 books, a journal, hiking boots, and a bottle of red wine, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. Not rage, not sadness, just a grounded sense of control, like I had finally stepped into the version of myself I'd spent years silencing. I left early Saturday morning before the chaos would begin. The drive to Aspen took about 4 hours, winding through golden aspens and steep switchbacks. The air grew thinner, cleaner, quieter. With every mile between me and my family, I felt the pressure in my chest start to ease. The cabin was better than I'd imagined. Rustic but comfortable, high ceilings, big windows, and a fireplace that filled the space with warmth. The owner, a retired forest ranger named Mitch, handed me the keys with a smile and said, "Cell service is hit or miss. There's a landline for emergencies. Other than that, you're on your own out here." Exactly what I wanted. That first day, I hiked a nearby trail and took pictures of wildflowers I couldn't name. I stood at the edge of a ridge watching the valley unfold beneath me and realized just how small I was and how small my family's approval had started to feel. When I returned that evening, I cooked myself a simple dinner, poured a glass of wine, and lit the fireplace. Only then did I power up my laptop. As expected, the family group chat was still quiet. They'd be packing by now, going over final checklists. Veronica probably had her Instagram captions pre-written. My parents were likely bragging to their friends about the cruise they booked themselves. I smiled at the thought. At 11:58 p.m., I initiated the final phase. I delayed their airline check-in by changing the traveler's contact number to my secondary inbox, redirecting the verification codes. I finalized the payment authorization hold, citing a pending ID mismatch. Then, I updated the cruise line's record to swap my dad's name from primary to companion status, an innocent glitch, but enough to cause issues at check-in. They wouldn't know any of this until it was too late. I shut the laptop, tucked it under a blanket, and crawled into bed. The next morning, I made coffee and sat on the porch swing as the sun rose over the mountain ridge. Light spilled across the trees in gold and amber, the wind whispering through the pines. It was serene, sacred, and almost holy silence. At 9:47 a.m. my phone buzzed. Then again. And again. I turned the screen over slowly, letting the vibrations run their course before checking. The group chat had exploded. Dad, there's a problem at the airport. Cruise isn't showing us on the list for today. Mom, they're saying something about a delay in payment I don't understand. We confirmed all this. Veronica. This is ridiculous. I've been standing here for 40 minutes. I told you we should have triple-checked everything. James, have we tried calling Rachel? Veronica, she's not answering, obviously. I put the phone down and went back to sipping my coffee. The breeze was crisp against my skin, the kind that makes you feel alive. I wasn't being petty. I wasn't being cruel. I was teaching them a lesson they refused to learn with words. By 10:30 a.m., the messages grew frantic. My dad sent a photo, him red-faced and furious, standing at the airline kiosk. My mom looked on the verge of tears. Veronica's expression was twisted with indignation, and James stood awkwardly to the side, hands on his hips like he wanted to disappear. At 11:15 a.m., my dad called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice cracked with confusion and anger. Rachel, we're stuck at the airport. The cruise isn't letting us on. I don't know what you did, but you need to fix this. Now. I muted the phone. I wasn't going to fix anything. Not this time. As the sun climbed higher over the mountains, I let my phone buzz until the battery drained. I wasn't hiding, I was healing. The kind of healing that comes from knowing you finally stopped begging to be included by people who only saw your value when it was useful to them. Around noon, I hiked a short trail that led to a small alpine lake, still as glass, reflecting the endless blue sky above. There, sitting on a rock in silence, I let the ache settle. I let it whisper all the things I hadn't been ready to say for years. You deserved better. You were never the problem. You are allowed to stop trying. When I returned to the cabin that evening and finally charged my phone, I found dozens of messages waiting. Veronica, unreal. I hope you're happy. Thousands wasted. You've always been so bitter. So jealous. Well, congrats, Rach. You ruined everything. Mom, sweetheart, please call us. I'm worried. If we did something to upset you, let's talk, okay? James. Just checking in. I don't know what's going on, but maybe we can fix it. Just you and me. No pressure. Dad, radio silence. Of course. It was always like that with him. Silence was his way of showing disapproval, of forcing the air in the room to turn heavy with expectation. When I was a kid, it made me anxious. Now it just confirmed I'd finally made an impact. Still, the onslaught of texts didn't break me. Instead, I poured a second glass of wine and stood outside in the cold mountain air, watching the stars blink into view. I could almost hear the family back home trying to spin the story their way. Poor us. We were betrayed. She's unstable. She needs help. That narrative had always been their fallback. What they'd never expected was that I'd simply walk away from their script. By Monday, they'd accepted that the cruise was officially missed. The airline offered them new tickets for a price, but even then they wouldn't make the ship's departure. Everything was lost. The money, the reservations, the fantasy of a perfect anniversary cruise. All of it gone, and I felt no guilt. Because guilt only exists where there is still hope for fairness. That morning, my dad broke his silence. A single text. "When I find you, we're going to have a serious conversation about what you've done." Not a threat, but not neutral either. Still, I didn't flinch. He hadn't said one word when I was excluded at the dinner table. Hadn't lifted a finger when Veronica mocked me. Hadn't asked once if I was okay while they packed their bags for a trip I helped plan, but wasn't welcome to join. Now, when the power dynamic shifted suddenly, I was the one who needed to be held accountable. No, I stayed at the cabin through the end of the week, hiking by day and writing in my journal by night. I filled the pages with memories that I had buried, moments when I shrunk myself to keep the peace, when I took the blame to keep the harmony, when I smiled through disrespect because I didn't want to make things worse. But this time I had made things worse for them. And in doing so, I had made things better for me. By Friday, the chat had gone quiet. The silence was a relief, a reset. I sat by the fireplace one last time that night, sipping tea and watching the flames flicker, and thought to myself, sometimes the only way to break a toxic pattern is to set the whole thing on fire. The next day, I drove back to Denver with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. The mountains faded in the rearview mirror, but their silence stayed with me. No podcasts, no music, just the rhythm of tires against the highway and the steady beat of my own heart. Strong, certain, steady. When I got home, my apartment felt warmer somehow, like it had missed me. I watered my plants, unpacked slowly, and opened the blinds to let the late afternoon sun spill across the floor. I checked my email. As expected, nothing urgent except for one subject line that stood out: family cruise final review request. I laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. By evening, the family group chat had reignited. Not with rage this time, though, that had come and gone, but with uncertainty. With questions. With something I hadn't seen from them before: hesitation. "Mom, Rachel, please come over Sunday. Just to talk. No pressure. Just us. Just your family." The word hit differently this time. Your family. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat on the couch, legs curled under me, and thought about what I would say if I did go. I wasn't going back to ask for forgiveness. I wasn't interested in playing peacemaker anymore. But I had things to say, truths that had lived too long in the shadows of polite silence. Sunday came. I pulled into the driveway at exactly noon. The same driveway I used to avoid looking at whenever I passed by. The same home where I once believed if I just kept showing up with a smile, I'd earn my seat at the table. Their cars were already there. Dad's silver pickup, Mom's sedan, Veronica's flashy red convertible that still had dealer plates because she kept forgetting to get permanent tags. I knocked on the door instead of using my old key. A quiet signal: "I don't assume I belong here anymore," Mom answered. Her eyes were tired, but her face softened when she saw me. "Hi, sweetie," she said. "Come in. They're all waiting." I stepped inside. The smell of cinnamon and roast chicken filled the air. Familiar, yet strangely distant. The living room hadn't changed: same couch, same family photos. But this time I noticed how many of those photos didn't include me. Or if they did, I was on the edge, barely visible, like a guest. Dad sat in his recliner, arms crossed. Veronica was perched on the edge of the couch, arms locked in front of her. James gave me a small nod from the armchair in the corner. "Sit down, Rachel," Dad said, controlled, cold. "I'll stand, thanks." His jaw tightened. "Do you have anything you want to say for yourself?" There it was, the opening move. Classic Dad, always framing the conflict as my fault. But I'd come prepared. "Actually, I do," I said, voice even. "But first, I'd like to hear what you all have to say about last Sunday's dinner, about telling me face to face that I'm not real family." Veronica rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, are we seriously doing this? You're still upset because you weren't invited on a trip?" I turned to her, calm. "No, I'm upset because you all used me to plan a luxury vacation, then laughed at me for assuming I'd be included. It was a joke, Mom added quickly. We didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I looked at her. But you did. And not just last week. Over and over again. And you never even noticed. Dad cleared his throat. You're twisting things. Am I? I asked. When's my birthday, Dad? He blinked. It's in April. It's March 5th. You've missed it 3 years in a row. I turned to Mom. What was my GPA when I graduated college? She looked down. I don't remember. 4.0, I said quietly, while working 2 jobs. And none of you came to my graduation. James shifted in his chair, guilt etched into his face. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I let the silence speak louder than my voice ever could. This isn't about a cruise, I said. It's about a lifetime of being treated like I'm optional. Like I'm the help. Like I'm not enough. And for the first time in that house, no one had anything to say. The silence in the living room was suffocating. You could have heard a pin drop if it weren't for the soft hum of the fridge in the kitchen. No one moved. No one dared look directly at me. And for once, I didn't flinch in the silence. I stood there steady and still, letting the weight of my words settle over them like fog on glass. Then James, bless him, finally broke it. She's right, he said, almost too quiet to hear. That was messed up. We did laugh. I laughed. Veronica whipped her head toward him like she'd been slapped. Whose side are you on? I'm not taking sides, James said, sitting forward. I'm just saying, if we're going to fix this, maybe we should actually own what we did. Veronica scoffed. Oh, so now you're some moral authority? Dad stood abruptly, hands clenched at his sides. Enough. This entire thing has gotten out of hand. You sabotaged a family vacation, Rachel. You cost us thousands of dollars. That's not the behavior of a mature adult, it's vindictive. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I saw him not as a father, but as a man flawed, defensive, and incapable of accepting that his version of family had been deeply broken. And excluding your daughter from a cruise while using her for her professional discounts is what Father of the Year behavior? Dad's face flushed crimson. I stepped closer. Let me ask you something, Dad. When's the last time you asked me how I was doing? Not about work. Not about how I could help you. Just me. He didn't answer. I turned to Veronica. Do you know where I live? Her eyes flickered. Of course I do. Where? She paused. It's somewhere off Colfax, right? I nodded slowly. It's fine. You've never been. You've never even asked. That's my point. I moved on to James. When's the last time you called me just to talk? James swallowed. I don't know. I guess I never thought you needed it. You were always solid. That word hit me like a slap and a hug all at once. I've been solid because I didn't have a choice, I said. Because if I crumbled, no one was going to pick me back up. I was never the one who got saved. I was the one who watched everyone else get saved while clapping quietly in the background. Mom, still seated on the love seat, finally spoke up. Honey, we didn't know. We thought you were happy doing your own thing. You always seemed so independent. That's not the same as not needing love, Mom. Her face crumpled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded like something long hidden finally made sense to her. I took a breath. This isn't about one cruise. It's about a lifetime of being treated like I was invisible unless you needed something. I made excuses for it. I told myself you didn't mean to. But last Sunday, you looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't real family. And you laughed. Veronica jumped up. So what, you decided to punish us? Ruin Mom's anniversary? Waste Dad's money? That's your idea of justice? I tilted my head. No. My idea of justice is showing you how it feels to be left behind, to be told you don't matter. And if I wanted revenge, I wouldn't have left you in an airport. I would have canceled the entire cruise. But I didn't. Veronica's mouth opened, then closed. She sat back down. I'm not asking for an apology, I said, softer now. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to hear me. To really hear me. Dad stepped forward, his voice low and sharp. If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back with open arms. Actions have consequences, Rachel. I looked at him unwavering. Yes, they do. That's the whole point. I turned to leave. That's when James stood up. Wait. I paused, hand on the doorknob. You're right. About everything he said. I've been a crap brother, but I want to be better. Will you think about talking again? Not today. Just someday. I met his eyes. I'd like that. And with that, I walked out head high, heart cracked, but steady, and for the first time in my life, no longer begging to belong. The days that followed felt eerily quiet, not just in the literal sense, though my phone barely buzzed, but emotionally like the storm had passed, leaving only damp ground and scattered debris in its wake. I wasn't sure what I had expected after walking out that day. Anger, silence. A dramatic phone call demanding I apologize. Instead, the group chat sat frozen in digital time. No one reached out. No one posted anything. It was like the entire family had slipped into emotional lockdown, processing the wreckage. I returned to work the next morning, unsure how to explain the sudden leave I'd taken, but my boss Clarissa waved me into her office with a kind smile. Everything okay? She asked, concern lining her face. I hesitated. Just family stuff. Needed to reset. She nodded, not pressing. Well, whatever it was, it looks like it worked. You seem lighter. I almost laughed. If only she knew. By Wednesday, a text finally arrived from James. James, hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay. It was simple, short, but it was enough. I waited a few hours, unsure how to reply. Eventually, I typed back, Me, I'm okay, thanks for asking. He responded immediately. James, can we grab coffee this weekend, just the two of us? I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Me, sure. Saturday. We met at a quiet cafe downtown Neutral Territory, far from our parents' house, and the emotional landmines buried there. James looked different. Not physically, but emotionally, like someone who'd been holding up a mirror all week and finally decided to look into it. He ordered my favorite oat milk latte, no sugar, without asking. A tiny detail, but one that made something shift inside me. So, he began once we were seated. That was quite the Sunday. I smirked. Which one? The dinner or the fallout? Both, he said, exhaling hard. Things have been tense. Rebecca's telling everyone you've lost it, that you had some kind of mental breakdown. Sounds like her, I said, shrugging. Mom's torn up. Dad's furious, obviously. But me, I've been thinking about everything you said. I waited, letting the silence stretch just enough to make him uncomfortable. You weren't wrong, he finally said. About any of it. I didn't see it before, but now I can't unsee it. The way Veronica always gets what she wants. How your wins get ignored. Even the birthday thing, Dad's never forgotten mine. Or hers, I added quietly. He nodded. But yours, I don't think he even knows the date. That acknowledgement hit harder than I expected. I had waited my whole life to be seen by my family, and now in this quiet coffee shop, it was finally happening, at least from one of them. I'm sorry, James said. I've been a terrible brother. It was a simple sentence. No fanfare. No excuses. And that made it more real than anything else could have. I nodded. Thank you for saying that. I can't fix the past, he continued. But I can be better. Starting now. For the next 2 hours we talked. Really talked. About our childhood, about Dad's expectations, about how Veronica always sucked up all the oxygen in the room. I told him about my career goals, my dream of starting my own boutique travel agency. He listened genuinely and even offered to help with connections if I ever needed them. When we parted ways, he hugged me. Tight. Long. The kind that said, I see you now. Don't give up on all of us, he whispered. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to make promises. But I didn't walk away either. That was something. The following week, the walls of silence began to crack. Not dramatically, no teary phone calls or doorstep confessions, but subtly. Like spring slowly melting a long winter. It started with a text from my mom. "Mom, I made your favorite lemon bars today and thought of you. I miss you, sweetheart." It was something. There was no apology, no direct acknowledgement of what happened. But it was the first breadcrumb. I didn't ignore it. I replied, "Me thanks." Just that. Not shutting the door but not opening it wide either. At work, things had returned to a steady rhythm. I threw myself into client meetings, destination planning, and rebuilding the mental boundaries I'd never had before. My coworkers noticed the shift. "Did you go to a retreat or something?" one of them joked. "You're glowing." I just smiled. I found peace in a cabin while my family unraveled at an airport, I thought. But I wasn't about to say that out loud. That Friday during lunch, a coworker leaned over at our table and asked, "Isn't Rebecca Morgan your sister?" I froze. Why? She posted something wild on Instagram about toxic family dynamics and betrayal. It's blowing up. I excused myself and opened the app. Sure enough, there it was. A carefully filtered selfie with an emotionally manipulative caption. "Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who twist the knife. Family isn't always what it seems." Gay, toxic bloodlines. Healing vibes. I scrolled through the comments. Cousins expressing confusion. Old friends sending heart emojis. One even wrote, "OMG, what happened? Call me." I didn't engage. Rebecca had always been an artist at rewriting history. This was just her latest masterpiece. What did surprise me was an email that arrived later that night from Aunt Helen, my dad's estranged sister. We'd never been close, but I always liked her sharp tongue and soft eyes. Subject: just checking in. "Rachel, I've been hearing some rumblings about family drama. Your cousin showed me one of Rebecca's posts and I couldn't ignore it. I don't want to pry, but I want you to know, if you ever need someone in your corner, I'm here. Love, Aunt Helen." I stared at the screen, heart tight. Someone had noticed. Someone outside the household chaos. And more than that, someone believed me without needing all the facts. I wrote back a simple reply. "Thank you. That means more than I can explain." As the leaves started turning, I could feel the holidays looming. Thanksgiving was always a big deal in my family. Extended relatives flew in from all over. My dad roasted the turkey like it was a military operation. My mom made enough mashed potatoes to feed a small country. And I'd always been the one organizing guest lists, coordinating airport pickups, decorating the table, and handling the logistics. Never asked. Just expected. This year, I didn't know if I'd be invited. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to be. That Friday, I met up with my best friend Maya at our usual Italian spot. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, twirling linguine. "You going to Thanksgiving?" I sighed. Part of me wants to disappear. Book a trip. Go to Utah or Portland. Just escape. Maya gave me a look. "Rach, you didn't do all of this just to run away again." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this wasn't just a rebellion. You stood up for yourself. For the first time. Don't let that momentum die in silence. Go. But go on your terms. Say what you need to say. Set the boundaries, and whatever happens next is their responsibility." Her words lodged themselves into my brain. All night they echoed. Say what you need to say. So I did. That weekend I sat down and drafted an email to my parents. Not to guilt trip them. Not to demand anything. Just my truth. I explained how their words had hurt, how their actions over the years had made me feel invisible, and what I needed moving forward: respect, acknowledgement, and space. I didn't send it immediately, but writing it was power enough for now. The next Sunday, my phone rang while I was folding laundry. I didn't recognize the number at first. But then I heard her voice. "Rachel," my mom said, her tone softer than I remembered. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. And I owe you an apology." I stopped mid-fold, breath caught in my throat. "A real one," she added. "Not just for the cruise. For a lot of things." I sank onto the edge of my bed, laundry forgotten. "I've never been fair to you," she continued. I've always expected more from you because you seemed so capable, so independent. I thought I was admiring your strength, but I didn't realize I was abandoning you emotionally in the process. I closed my eyes. A tear slid down my cheek. You don't matter less, Rachel. You never did. There it was. The thing I had been waiting to hear my entire life and had stopped believing would ever come. Mom, I started, but she gently interrupted. Please let me finish. Your father, he's still angry. But he's listening. We both are. If you're willing, we'd like to talk. Really talk. No pretending. No sweeping it under the rug. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. I'd like that. We're having dinner next Sunday. Just a conversation. Kyle will be there too. I hesitated. What about Veronica? She needs more time, Mom said. But this isn't about her right now. It's about hearing you. Her voice cracked on the last word. I agreed to come. Not because I trusted everything would magically be repaired, but because something fundamental had shifted. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to lose it again. Fast forward 6 months. I stood in my parents' kitchen helping Mom prepare Easter dinner. The sunlight streamed through the window above the sink, and for the first time ever, I noticed a new set of framed photos on the wall. Ones that included me, not off to the side, not half cropped out, but front and center. Me at my college graduation. Me with Maya at my birthday. Me smiling at the camera with no one else in the frame. Can you check on the rolls? Mom asked as she stirred the gravy. I opened the oven and nodded. Few more minutes. So much had changed since that confrontation in the living room. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been quick. But it had been real. Kyle, well, James, but I always called him Kyle when we were kids, had become my strongest ally. He called regularly. Not because he needed advice, but just to talk. He was the one who stood up when old patterns tried to resurface. When Dad started slipping into his stoic silence again, Kyle would nudge him back into the present with, "Hey, remember what we talked about?" Mom had started therapy. That alone had shocked me. But more shocking was her willingness to share what she was learning. About her own childhood. About the things she'd internalized and passed down without realizing it. Our weekly coffee meetups became a tradition. Not just as mother and daughter, but as two women trying to understand each other on equal ground. Dad? Well, Dad was the slowest to change, but even he showed signs. He helped me move into a new apartment in January, carried boxes, assembled shelves, even installed my new curtain rods. When we sat down that night, exhausted and sweaty, he handed me a cold beer, patted my knee, and said, "You've done good, kid." I should have said that more. It wasn't poetic, but from him, it was a mountain. Veronica still complicated. She'd come to a few family dinners, mostly quiet sometimes, passive-aggressive. But at one lunch last month, she surprised me. She asked about my job. Genuinely. And didn't turn the conversation back to herself. It wasn't a full transformation, but it was human. As we set the table that Easter, I noticed something else. I wasn't seated at the far end or at the extra fold-out card table like years before. My place was to Dad's right, a seat he normally reserved for honored guests. Before dinner began, Dad stood with a deep breath. "I want to say something," he said. "This past year's been hard, but Rachel, I haven't always been the father you deserved. I see that now." He looked directly at me. "We're planning another cruise. Thanksgiving week. And we want you to help plan it, not for your discount, but because we want you there." I blinked back tears. "I'd like that," I said softly. And this time, I knew they meant it. After dinner, while the rest of the family gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert, I stayed back in the kitchen to rinse the dishes. The mood was lighter than I'd ever experienced in that house. Conversation flowed without tension. Laughter didn't carry that sharp undertone it used to, and no one looked over their shoulder waiting to be judged. As I was drying a plate, Veronica stepped in. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me with an unreadable expression. Finally, she cleared her throat. "I've been meaning to ask, she said, picking up a plate and inspecting it like it might break in her hands. How did you do it? I blinked. Do what? The cruise thing, she muttered. Technically, I mean. I smirked slightly. Professional secret. She rolled her eyes, but it wasn't hostile. Fair enough. It was impressive. Not that I'm condoning it or anything. Of course not, I said, drying a glass and placing it gently in the rack. There was another pause. She shifted awkwardly like someone standing on unfamiliar terrain. I've been thinking, she said slowly, about what you said that day. At the house. About how we treated you. And I know I've been kind of selfish. Mean even. I raised an eyebrow. Sometimes? She gave a dry laugh, then looked down. A lot of the time. It wasn't a full apology. Not even close. But for Veronica, it was miles from where she'd been. And more importantly, it felt real. I'm trying, she added. It's just hard to change. I nodded. It is. But it's possible. I've changed too, you know. I'm not the same person who let herself be walked over for years. I've noticed, she said, her lips tugging into a faint smirk that quickly faded. For what it's worth, I like this version of you better. She stands up for herself. I set the towel down, turning to face her fully. Thanks, Veronica. That means more than you think. We finished the dishes in relative silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was reflective. Like two people learning how to exist in the same space again, without stepping on each other's shadows. Later that evening, we all gathered in the living room, nursing mugs of coffee and passing around slices of lemon bars. Mom sat with Aunt Helen, chatting about summer garden plans. Kyle was showing Dad pictures of a new condo he was thinking of buying. And Veronica, she was on the couch next to me, scrolling through her phone quietly, occasionally glancing up to contribute to the conversation. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And that was something I never thought I'd have with them again. As I watched my family, my complicated, evolving, often frustrating family, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything had been fixed, but because I no longer needed it to be. Later that night, as I drove home along the quiet, lamplit streets, Aunt Helen's parting words echoed in my head. I'm proud of you, she had whispered as she hugged me goodbye. It takes real courage to ask for better from the people who should have given you their best all along. She was right. This journey hadn't just been about exposing what was broken. It was about choosing not to be broken with it. It was about standing tall in the face of mockery and saying no more. About reclaiming space at a table I'd once tiptoed around just to earn crumbs of approval. It was about drawing a line and saying, this is what I will no longer accept. From you, or from myself. And somehow in doing that, I had become someone new. Not harder, not colder, just whole. Fall turned to winter, and for once the changing seasons didn't mirror chaos inside my life. The transformation I had started that night at the dinner table when I chose not to break, but to rise, was still unfolding in quiet, meaningful ways. By mid-November, Thanksgiving plans were in full motion. But this time something was different. I wasn't just told where to be and what to bring like usual. I was asked, genuinely. Hey Rach, Mom texted one afternoon. Would you be open to hosting the pre-dinner planning this year? You're so organized and we really want your input. It wasn't lost on me how small a gesture that seemed on the surface, but how massive it felt to be included before the decisions were made. So I agreed. And not just out of habit or obligation. I agreed because this time I had the power to say no, and chose not to. The night of the planning dinner, Kyle arrived early with pie, Veronica brought a surprisingly thoughtful wine choice, and Dad showed up with a notepad and a slight grimace, but at least he showed up. Let's get through this without killing each other, he muttered, sliding into a chair. I looked at him and smiled. Deal. Over dinner, we talked about seating charts, allergies, menu preferences, even playlist ideas. For once, no one steamrolled the conversation. No one dismissed my suggestions. In fact, they wrote them down. Veronica even laughed at one of my jokes. Genuinely. Later, while we were cleaning up, she asked about a group trip I'd been organizing for a client. That boutique travel business you talked about, is that still a thing? I nodded, surprised by her interest. Yeah, I'm hoping to launch officially in spring. She actually looked impressed. Well, let me know if you need help with social media. I mean, I do have 8,000 followers. I grinned, noted. After everyone left, Dad stayed behind. He lingered awkwardly at the door, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. I wanted to say something, he muttered. I waited. You've handled all this better than I would have. I tilted my head, curious. All this? He sighed. The cruise? The dinner? The fallout? All of it. You didn't just walk away, you made us face stuff we never wanted to admit. I nodded slowly, and I was wrong, he said. The words sounded foreign coming from him. About a lot of things. About how I saw you. How I treated you. I thought being tough meant being silent. Turns out I was just being blind. The air between us shifted. Thanks, Dad. He exhaled, relieved. We good. We're working on it, I said. But yeah, we're better. He gave me an awkward one-armed hug and slipped out the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment, stunned. It wasn't a movie-ending kind of closure, but it was real, and that was enough. The next day, I finally hit send on the draft email I'd written weeks before. It wasn't angry or accusatory. It was honest, measured, kind even. It ended with this: I don't want perfection. I don't expect you to undo years overnight. I just want to know that when I show up, I matter not because I'm useful or easy or quiet, but because I'm me. A few hours later, Mom responded, You've always mattered. I'm sorry it took us this long to show it. For the first time in years, I believed her. Thanksgiving morning dawned with a calmness I couldn't quite explain. No anxiety, no forced smiles. No dread about walking into a room where I'd feel like a background character in my own family story. Instead, I woke up early, made coffee, and put on a playlist that I liked, something mellow and acoustic. I took my time getting ready, curling my hair, choosing an outfit that made me feel confident, not invisible. I even added a touch of lipstick, which for me meant I was feeling strong. By 11:00 a.m., I pulled up to my parents' house with a roasted butternut squash dish and a bottle of wine in hand. No one rushed to the door. No one greeted me like I was a surprise guest. Instead, when I stepped inside, it was natural, like I belonged. Because this time I knew I did. Rachel, Mom called from the kitchen. You made it. She gave me a quick hug with hands still covered in flour. The kitchen was buzzing, pots, boiling oven timers going off, music playing low from the speaker in the corner. Veronica was chopping green beans, Kyle was setting the table, and Dad, he was in an apron. No joke, basting a turkey with military precision. Wow, I said, setting my dish down. Look at this coordinated operation. Kyle laughed. Yeah, we've leveled up since last year's disaster. Dad smirked without looking up. We had no choice. The head of logistics is watching. I raised an eyebrow. That me? Veronica looked over, grinning. Obviously. It was surreal. The banter, the warmth, the effort. A far cry from the stilted silence and exclusion of the past. As we sat down for dinner, the table looked fuller than it had in years, not just in food, but in energy. We went around sharing what we were grateful for, a tradition I used to hate because it always felt performative. But this year, it felt earned. When it got to me, I took a breath. I'm thankful, I said, for the space to speak. And for people who are willing to listen even when it's uncomfortable. I'm thankful for growth. And boundaries. And second chances. No one looked away. No one rolled their eyes. In fact, Dad nodded. Well said. Later, after dessert, I found myself outside on the back porch with Kyle. The sky was clear, stars beginning to peek through the dark. We were sipping warm cider wrapped in blankets like kids at camp. You know, he said, a year ago I would have bet money we'd never be sitting here like this. I smiled. Same. But I'm glad we are. Me too. He looked at me for a moment, then added, Veronica's trying. I know she's a lot, but she asked me last week if I thought you'd ever really forgive her. I tilted my head. Did you tell her the truth? I told her she had to earn it. I nodded slowly. That's fair. We fell into a comfortable silence. The kind that comes not from knowing everything is perfect, but from knowing you've survived the worst and chosen not to carry it forward. Eventually, everyone started packing up. Hugs were exchanged, leftovers divvied up. Someone made a joke about booking the next cruise together this time. When I drove home that night, my heart felt full in a way it hadn't in years. Not because I had gotten revenge, not because I had won, but because I had reclaimed something I thought I'd lost forever. My worth, my place, my voice. And this time, I hadn't had to beg for it. Christmas came quickly after that, wrapped in twinkling lights and unexpected peace. Normally, the holidays used to trigger something in me, an anxiety, a tension in my shoulders, a mental tally of how I'd be used, overlooked, or left out. But this year, the energy felt different. Invitations were sent early. I wasn't the last to know. In fact, I was asked to co-host. Would you mind putting together the gift exchange list? Mom had texted me in late November. You're better with people's preferences than I am. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because it was groundbreaking, but because it wasn't. It was casual, natural. Like they'd finally seen me not as someone on the outside, but as someone essential. I said yes. When I arrived at their house on Christmas Eve, the driveway was full. The front lawn glowed with classic decorations, nothing too gaudy, nothing screaming for attention. Just warm, familiar. Inside, the fire was crackling. Holiday music played low. The tree stood tall, ornaments gathered from decades of family moments. And there, beneath the lowest branches, sat a small pile of gifts, one with my name on it, front and center. Veronica greeted me first, and shockingly hugged me, not an air kiss, a real hug. Okay, she said, stepping back. I've got something for you, but don't open it until after dinner. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement that didn't feel performative. I didn't press. Dinner was loud, joyful, a little chaotic, exactly what a family dinner should be. I wasn't pushed into the kitchen. I wasn't ignored at the table. In fact, when conversation turned to New Year plans, everyone looked to me for suggestions. I caught Dad watching me at one point. He raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. Not a toast, just a quiet nod. I returned it. After dessert, we moved to the living room for gifts. Veronica handed me a neatly wrapped box. Okay, she said. I know I'm not the easiest person to love, but I saw this and thought, maybe it would remind you that I'm trying. Inside the box was a leather-bound planner. On the inside cover, she'd written, "To the sister who plans everything but finally planned a way back to herself. I'm proud of you, V." I stared at it for a long moment. My eyes stung. Thank you, I whispered. That means more than you know. I'm not great with words, she said. So I figured I'd borrow a few. Still counts. Kyle smiled from the other end of the couch. I'm just glad we're all here. Like really here. Mom and Dad exchanged a look, then reached into a small drawer beneath the tree and handed me an envelope. Inside was a printed itinerary: Blake Family Cruise, Thanksgiving 2025. I laughed. This again. We want you to handle the logistics, Dad said, smiling. But only if you want to. I held the itinerary, the planner, and their words like sacred little proof points of how far we'd all come. And I realized something. I didn't need a perfect family. I just needed an honest one. One that could admit failure, one that could grow, and one that could hold space for me, even if it took a long, painful road to get there. And now, as the snow fell gently outside and the lights twinkled on the tree, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Home. New Year's Eve came with an unexpected stillness. No parties, no big countdowns. Just me alone in my apartment, curled up on the couch in cozy socks, a warm blanket over my lap, and a candle burning on the coffee table. It was the first time in years I had allowed myself to simply be without trying to prove, fix, or earn anything. I sipped a glass of wine and scrolled through old photos on my phone. So many moments where I had forced a smile to make others comfortable. Pictures from holidays, vacations, birthdays, where I was physically present but emotionally absent, forgotten, faded into the background. But then the photos changed. There were newer ones, me and Kyle at the coffee shop, my mom helping me hang curtains in my new place, even a selfie with Veronica to my own shock at brunch. I was in the frame, centered, real. It hit me then, I hadn't just reclaimed my place in the family. I had reclaimed myself. I thought back to that Sunday dinner, the one that changed everything. The moment Veronica laughed, not knowing I had already rerouted their vacation out from under them. I remembered the heat in my chest, the sting in my throat, and the power in my choice to walk away instead of begging to be included. That choice had sent a ripple through my family. It burned bridges we'd long pretended were strong. But in their place, we'd built new ones, sturdier, slower, more intentional. This wasn't a fairy tale. We still had awkward silences, missteps, frustrations. But now we also had honesty. I picked up my journal, something I'd started using more lately, and turned to a blank page. At the top, I wrote, "Things I've learned this year." And beneath it, "Silence doesn't equal peace. Being the strong one doesn't mean you don't deserve support. Boundaries are not punishments. They're invitations for people to meet you with respect. Healing is messy, but it's possible. Sometimes walking away is the bravest form of love." By the time midnight rolled around, I didn't need fireworks. I had clarity. I had growth. And when my phone buzzed with a text from Kyle, "Happy New Year, sis. Here's to the next chapter." I smiled, because for once it didn't feel like I was starting over. It felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Spring bloomed slowly that year, like everything else in my life unfolding in its own time. I had spent the last few months rebuilding not just relationships, but rhythm. A rhythm that belonged to me. In April, I officially launched my boutique travel planning business. The idea had been simmering for years, tucked in the corners of notebooks and late-night daydreams. But now it had structure, branding, a website, and clients. Real ones. Some referrals from friends, a few from old coworkers, and even one from Kyle's fiancé who raved about my attention to detail. Veronica surprised me the most. She posted about my business on her Instagram twice. Once with a glowing caption that read, "Need someone who knows how to plan a trip and keep your mother-in-law from losing her passport? Call Rachel." It was lighthearted but sincere, and when I thanked her privately, she didn't brush it off. "Look," she said, "I still mess up. I know that. But I want to do better." I meant what I wrote in that planner. You really did plan your way back to yourself, and honestly, I respect the hell out of that. We weren't best friends, but we were something new, two adults trying to meet each other with grace. Mom started inviting me to gardening workshops with her on Saturdays. Dad joined a hiking group one I recommended. He even sent me photos of a trail he completed, along with the message, "Thought of you." That old stubborn streak comes in handy on the uphill climbs. There were still moments when I caught myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. When someone would say something that hit too close to old wounds and I'd brace for impact. But instead of staying quiet, I spoke up. And instead of shutting down, they listened. Progress. In early May, I took a solo trip to Big Sur, a place that had always been on my list but never felt earned. That weekend, standing on the cliffs overlooking the Pacific wind tugging at my hair, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Yes, that Sunday dinner had started with rage, humiliation, and the quiet click of my retreating heels. But everything after that, every boundary, every conversation, every choice, had been about something deeper. Redemption, restoration, reclaiming joy. I watched the waves crash below and said aloud to no one in particular, "I'm proud of who I've become. Because I am. And for the first time in a long, long time, that was enough. Life has a way of circling back, bringing you to the very places that once broke you, only this time, with new eyes and a stronger spine. In the months that followed, I kept thinking about that dinner, the one where everything cracked open. Not because it was some grand cinematic moment, but because it was mine. The turning point not in a script, but in my heart. I used to think I had to earn love through silence. That being easygoing meant being invisible. That if I didn't protest, I'd be safe. But safety isn't the same as peace, and silence isn't the same as acceptance. Now I know the truth. You don't have to shrink to keep people comfortable. You don't have to carry the emotional weight of an entire family just to prove your value. You can say no. You can walk away. You can change the story. And if they love you, they'll meet you where you are, even if it takes them time. So if you're reading this, watching this, listening to this, and you feel like the odd one out, the afterthought, the designated helper who's never helped in return, let this be your reminder. You are not difficult. You are not too much. You are not wrong for asking to be seen. You are worthy, not for what you do, not for how much you give, but simply because you exist. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is finally stop trying to fit into a space that was never designed for your full self and start building your own. Because trust me, when you do, the people who truly matter will find their way to you. And the peace you are chasing, it'll meet you right where you are.